where I first heard about Mother Jones and learned most of what I just told you off of the world's oldest living wobbly, Minnie Corder. Well, she's not alive now, but when I knew her, she was the oldest living wobbly, Minnie Corder, in New York City, a garment worker who really knew about Mother Jones. And since I didn't, regarded my education as substantially deficient, I've arrived at the same conclusion in any number of instances. Jack Miller now. Jack Miller was on the Varona. I don't know how much I want to tell you about Jack. We have time for, there's a whole lot to tell. Jack Miller was a working logger, organized from the industrial workers of the world, the Wobblies, which is the union I belong to now for better than 40 years. Jack Miller kept the Senior Citizen Center in Seattle as an old man, where I'd have a chance to go in and sit and talk with him and ask questions, and gradually watch him unfold, and talk about things he hadn't even talked about to his own children. Well, Jack was on the Varona. There was a shingle weaver strike up Puget Sound, a town called Everett, 1916. Well, the Wobblies down in the Seattle area in Tacoma, they rented a steam launch called the Varona to take strike relief up there. There was also a free speech fight going on because the law had driven the soapboxers, the union soapboxers, from the streets and thrown them in jail. So it was a free speech fight because it's worth fighting for. So they took the steam launch up there. Now, Sheriff McRae in Everett had armed every deputy in that. Had deputized every drunk, for crying out loud, just to flush the bars out, gave him a star, swore him an oath, and gave him a rifle. Well, Everett has this piers, come out, a big U shape, and the Varona sailed into that. And it was ringed with armed deputies. They parked the boat, lowered the gangplank. Sheriff McRae stood at the bottom of the gangplank and said, "Who are your leaders here?" And with one voice, they shouted back, "We are all leaders here." Well, that scared the tar out of them. That's when the shooting started. They raked the deck of the Varona with gunfire, and a lot of those Wobblies were killed. And it fell in the water. I heard part of this story from old Nels Peterson, who was a young logger on the docks waiting to greet his fellow workers as they came in. And he remembered for the rest of his life going down the next day and seeing one of their hats floating on the water out on Puget Sound. Well, of course, they had to get out of there. We're all going to be killed. Jack Miller went to the engineer of the boat, cowering behind the boiler, said, "Back this thing out. We're all going to die." And the fellow said, "I'm not coming out. I'll get shot." And Jack Miller pulled a pistol from his waistband and pointed at him and said, "I can't miss from here." So he backed the boat out. He went back down to Seattle. They were arrested because some of those drunk deputies had killed each other in the crossfire. They were arrested, thrown in jail, taken up to Snohomish County, the brand new jail up there, the latest affair. In fact, it had hardly been finished. And they put all these Wobblies in there, including Jack Miller. And Jack said, "Well, that was a brand new jail. It was all steel, the first all steel jail. And 4 big bays in it. There wasn't any smokes. The heat hadn't been turned on. We couldn't get any blankets. It was miserable. The windows were high up. You couldn't see out. And we were marooned." Think about this thing. He said, "I woke up at night. We were all crammed around the corners, leaning against each other for warmth. I woke up at night, and I felt something. I heard something. And I didn't know what it was. It was just a sound. It was coming in between the bars and the open windows." So he said he woke up the fellow next to him, and who woke up the fellow next to him. Jack was a little man. And the one guy climbed up on the other guy's shoulders, and then Jack climbed up both of them, stood on the second man. They looked out the window, and they saw an enormous procession coming up the road. And it was all Union brothers and sisters that had organized in Seattle and marched to Snohomish up there. And they were led by Russian merchant marine sailors who had jumped ship so they could be part of this demonstration. What the sound he was hearing was the International. "Arise, ye prisoners of starvation, arise, ye wretched of the earth." They surrounded the jail. and sang to those Wobblies all night long to let them know that they weren't alone. Like old Ralph Chaplin, who wrote Solidarity Forever, said, "We are in here for you. You are out there for us." See? It's nothing I ever learned in school, you know. I learned it from Jack Miller. They needed to they were griping about the smokes and no grub and no blankets. He said they built a battleship. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, I can describe it to you. I just can't tell you where the name comes from. It's lost in the mists of history." Built a battleship. "Well, how'd it go?" He said, "Well, we passed a note from one cell block to the other. And then the next day, by prearrangement, when the noon whistle blew, we were all gathered around this post that ran up the middle of each cell block, gathered around the post. And as soon as that whistle blew, we all started jumping up and down in the same time, singing at the top of our lungs. We just jumped up and down and up and down and up and down. And finally, hit the resonating frequency of the south wall of that jail. And just like breaking a bridge, they broke the wall. They broke the jail. And they got their cigarettes, they got the blankets, and they got their food too, you know. And Jack Miller would say, and they proved everlastingly what a union is for, to get things done together that you can't get done alone. That's all it was ever intended to be. Old Jack Miller, yeah, he was there working in the logging camps. He said, "We just lie there in the rainforest, our clothes piled in front of a fire, hoping they might be a little more dry when we got up to go to work again. No bunkhouses. You carried everything you owned on your back, your bedroll, or your whole stake, just your bindle, your balloon." 1917 May Day, again, by being organized, by prearrangement. When they boomed into the freight yard, Spokane, Pasco, Richland, all over the Northwest, they got off of the freight trains. Instead of booming up into the forest, they stacked their bindles up in huge piles, poured kerosene on them, and burned them up the day they burned the bindles. Everything they owned. And that was to force the bosses to put bunkhouses in the logging camps. See? Direct action. Didn't do them any good to write their congressman or senator. They owned the mines. That's how you got to be a congressman or senator. You own the mine, you own the forest. You all understand that. Here, of course. Jack Miller. Well, I said to him, "Okay, you were building a battleship there in the Snohomish jail. What was it that you were singing?" And, well, Mark, grab your guitar. I've had an operation on my hand here last week for the Dupuytren's contracture, and it's healing nicely. I can now uncurl my fingers before it was curled up. But I can lay my hand flat for the first time in 7 years, but I can't use the fingers for, another, I don't know, month, for very much. Yeah, T-Bone Slim was a German logger. That logger lived up there in Spokane. I was there in the free speech fight in 1910. And he was a Valentin Ruda. He was a Finnish immigrant. The Finns were the tough ones. They were socialists when they got here. And he traveled around and he wrote songs. And some of them just kind of fell into the tradition. He used vaudeville tunes and popular tunes of the day, like the Wobblies did, or old hymn tunes. The Wobblies liked to steal the hymns because they were pretty and then change the words so they made more sense. Being how the Union offers a more immediate form of salvation than the standard garden variety. Huh? This is what they were singing in the battleship. They go wild, simply wild over me. Although I've never done them harm that I can see. I'm scared as a lamb, but they take me for a ram. They go wild, simply wild over me. Oh, the cock went wild over me. And he held his gun where everyone could see. He was breathing rather hard when he saw my Union card. He went wild, simply wild over me. When the judge, he went wild over me. And I plainly saw we never could agree. So I let the man obey what his conscience had to say. He went wild, simply wild over me. Let the jailer, he went wild over me up and threw away the key. It seemed up in the rage, they locked me in a cage, and they went wild, simply wild over me. Now they go wild, simply wild over me. I'm referring to the bedbug and the flea. Oh, they murmur in the sleep, they disturb the slumber deep, and they go wild, simply wild over me. Oh, will the rose go wild over me? Oh, when I've gone into the land that is to be. Oh, when my soul and body part in the stillness of my heart, will the roses grow wild over me? Oh, well then God went wild over me.